In Stoic philosophy, evil is not defined by noise, violence, or chaos, but by a quiet corruption of reason. A truly dangerous person is not someone who loses control, but someone who remains calm while deliberately destabilizing others. One of the clearest signs that you are dealing with such a person is that they derive satisfaction from your confusion or emotional pain. This pleasure is often subtle and hidden, but it is consistent. They are not confused themselves, nor are they acting impulsively. They know exactly what they are doing, and they watch carefully to see its effect on you. Marcus Aurelius warned that the soul becomes shaped by the thoughts it entertains, and when a person repeatedly chooses to enjoy another's inner disturbance, their character hardens around that choice. This is not accidental harm, it is intentional disturbance. Stoicism teaches that reason is the highest human faculty, and when reason is attacked, the entire inner world becomes unstable. Evil individuals understand this instinctively. Instead of open cruelty, they create confusion. They contradict themselves, subtly change facts, deny things they clearly said, or mix kindness with sudden coldness. This inconsistency is not disorder, but design. Confusion weakens judgment, and weakened judgment leads a person to doubt their own perceptions. Once doubt sets in, the victim begins to look outward for validation and explanation, slowly surrendering inner authority. Marcus Aurelius believed that a confused mind cannot live in accordance with nature, and the evil person exploits this by turning clarity into uncertainty and certainty into hesitation. What makes this behavior especially dangerous is that the emotional pain caused is not loud or dramatic. It is quiet, internal, and often invisible to others. The evil person does not seek public conflict, but private disturbance. They provoke just enough discomfort to unsettle you without drawing attention to themselves. A casual remark, a light mockery, a dismissive tone, or a carefully placed comment about something personal is enough. Then they observe. Your silence, your overthinking, your emotional restraint becomes their reward. Seneca warned that cruelty finds pleasure in suffering, and this form of cruelty is refined. It feeds not on streams, but on subtle erosion of peace. Such individuals are careful to protect themselves through ambiguity. If confronted, they deny intent, question your interpretation, or accuse you of being too sensitive. This is not an honest misunderstanding. It is a shield. By staying vague, they avoid responsibility while maintaining control. Epictetus taught that people do wrong because they believe it benefits them, and for this type of person, confusion is beneficial. It grants them freedom to harm without consequence and allows them to reverse blame onto the person they destabilize. The more you explain yourself, the more ground you lose, because they are not interested in truth, but in maintaining dominance over the narrative. Stoicism draws a firm line between those who harm out of weakness and those who harm out of enjoyment. A toxic person may lash out emotionally and later feel guilt. An evil person adapts, refines, and continues. They study reactions, adjust methods, and remain emotionally untouched by the damage they cause. This is why Marcus Aurelius advised against becoming like those who harm you, because engaging on their terms only strengthens their influence. When someone enjoys your confusion, you are no longer dealing with miscommunication. You are dealing with intent. Stoics are trained to observe patterns rather than isolated incidents. If interaction with someone repeatedly leaves you mentally drained, unsettled, or questioning your own judgment, this is not emotional weakness, but information. Inner disturbance is data. The Stoics believed that peace does not disappear without cause, and when it vanishes consistently in the presence of a particular person, reason demands attention. Confrontation often fails in these situations because reaction is exactly what the evil person seeks. To provoke emotion is to confirm control. Epictetus warned that if someone can disturb your inner state, they hold power over you. The Stoic response is not anger, revenge, or emotional explanation, but clarity paired with restraint. By offering short, factual responses and withdrawing emotional energy, the Stoic removes the reward. When there is no confusion to exploit and no reaction to harvest, the evil person loses interest. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself daily that he always retained the option of having no opinion, and this mental sovereignty is the strongest defense. Distance in Stoicism is not cowardice, but wisdom. Seneca advised avoiding those who poison the soul, not out of fear, but out of respect for virtue. Protecting your inner peace is not selfish, it is a moral duty. The most dangerous individuals are not those who rage or shout, but those who smile while you unravel, who remain calm while you doubt yourself, and who appear reasonable while causing harm. If someone consistently leaves you confused, diminished, or internally unsettled, and seems unaffected or subtly pleased by it, Stoicism considers this a serious moral failing on their part. Your responsibility is not to change them, expose them, or endure them, but to protect your reason. Once reason is secure, evil loses its access. Sign 2. They never take responsibility, they only control the narrative. In Stoic philosophy, responsibility is inseparable from virtue. A person who refuses to accept responsibility is not merely avoiding blame, they are rejecting reason itself. One of the clearest signs you are dealing with an evil person is that they are never at fault in their own story. No matter what happens, they remain innocent, misunderstood, or victimized, while others are framed as irrational, cruel, or unfair. This is not simple defensiveness, it is a deliberate manipulation of reality. The Stoics believe that truth is aligned with nature, and anyone who consistently distorts truth to protect themselves is acting against nature, and therefore against virtue. Such individuals do not argue facts, they reshape meaning. When confronted with evidence, they do not deny events outright, but reinterpret them. Words are twisted, intentions are reassigned, and context is conveniently altered. What you experienced clearly becomes, in their version, something entirely different. They may admit to minor details while rejecting responsibility for the outcome, presenting themselves as reasonable while subtly placing the burden of wrongdoing on you. Marcus Aurelius warned that people who fear accountability cling to appearances rather than substance, because appearances can be managed, while truth cannot. What makes this behavior especially destructive is that it gradually destabilizes your sense of reality. You begin to question whether your memory is accurate, whether your reaction was justified, and whether you somehow provoked the situation. The evil person does not need to shout or threaten. They simply repeat their version calmly and confidently. Over time, confidence begins to sound like truth. Epictetus taught that when people abandon honesty, they rely on persuasion instead of reason, and persuasion becomes their primary weapon. The goal is not resolution, but dominance over the narrative. Responsibility threatens them because it limits control. To accept fault would mean acknowledging another person's reality, and that is intolerable to someone who feeds on superiority. By never accepting blame, they maintain moral high ground in their own mind, and often in the eyes of others. They become skilled at appearing reasonable, measured, and mature, while quietly painting you as emotional or unstable. Seneca warned that injustice often hides behind calm speech and polished manners, because people trust tone more than truth. Stoicism teaches that a virtuous person seeks correction, not victory. An evil person seeks victory, not truth. This is why discussions with them feel circular and exhausting. No matter how clearly you explain, the outcome never changes. The conversation always ends with them untouched, and you drained. This is not because you failed to communicate, but because communication was never the objective. Control was. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself that it is futile to argue with someone who has already chosen dishonesty, because reason cannot reach a mind that refuses to be accountable. Over time, this pattern erodes self-trust. You may find yourself over-explaining, justifying emotions, or collecting proof for things you know you experienced. This is a sign that the narrative has shifted away from truth and toward defense. The Stoics would see this as a warning that your rational autonomy is under threat. When you begin to feel the need to defend reality itself, something has already gone wrong. The Stoic response is not to win the argument, but to exit the game. You do not need agreement from someone committed to distortion.
by refusing to debate your lived experience, and by disengaging from narrative battles, you reclaim your inner authority. Epictetus taught that you are harmed not by events, but by the judgments you allow to replace your own. When you stop seeking validation from someone who avoids responsibility, their power dissolves.
Distance, clarity, and silence are not signs of weakness in Stoicism. They are expressions of strength. You are not obligated to carry the moral weight of someone else's dishonesty. When a person consistently avoids responsibility and instead reshapes reality to protect themselves, Stoicism does not call this misunderstanding. It calls it vice. And the Stoic answer to vice is not argument, but withdrawal in service of virtue. They weaponize kindness and guilt. In Stoic philosophy, true kindness is an expression of virtue, offered freely and without expectation. When kindness is used as a tool to control, it ceases to be virtue and becomes manipulation. One of the most deceptive signs you are dealing with an evil person is that they appear generous, caring, or supportive, yet their kindness always carries a hidden cost. Nothing they give is free. Every favor, compliment, or act of concern becomes a future obligation, subtly stored and later used to induce guilt, compliance, or silence. The Stoics warned that vice often disguises itself as virtue because people lower their defenses when they believe they are safe. Such individuals carefully construct an image of goodness. They help publicly, speak softly, and present themselves as morally superior. Yet privately, they keep a mental record of everything they have done for you. When conflict arises, that record is brought out, not openly, but through implication. You are reminded of their sacrifices, their patience, their generosity, while your boundaries are framed as ingratitude. Marcus Aurelius wrote that virtue seeks nothing in return, and when someone demands loyalty or obedience as payment for kindness, they have already betrayed virtue. Guilt is their most effective weapon because it attacks your moral identity rather than your logic. Instead of arguing facts, they make you feel like a bad person for resisting them. You may hear phrases that suggest disappointment rather than accusation, yet the effect is the same. You begin to feel selfish for asserting yourself and ungrateful for needing space. Seneca warned that emotional debts enslave the mind more effectively than force, because the prisoner believes they deserve the chains. This tactic is especially powerful against people with strong values. The evil person senses compassion and integrity and exploits them. They portray themselves as wounded, misunderstood, or endless, selflessly giving, ensuring that any attempt you make to protect yourself appears cruel. Over time, you may find yourself suppressing discomfort to avoid hurting them, even as they continue to overstep boundaries. Stoicism teaches that virtue never requires self-betrayal, and any morality that demands you abandon reason or dignity is false. What makes this behavior dangerous is its invisibility. From the outside, the evil person looks kind, patient, and selfless. From the inside, you feel indebted, constrained, and emotionally monitored. The contrast creates isolation, because explaining your discomfort sounds irrational to others who only see the polished surface. Epictetus taught that some people do not seek companionship but control, and they achieve it by appearing indispensable rather than threatening. The Stoic response is to separate virtue from obligation. Kindness does not bind your will. Gratitude does not erase boundaries. A Stoic accepts help without surrendering autonomy, and withdraws calmly when generosity turns into leverage. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself that he owed honesty to himself before approval from others. By refusing to be ruled by guilt, and by judging actions by their intent rather than their appearance, the Stoic dismantles this form of manipulation. Ultimately, a person who weaponizes kindness is not benevolent, but strategic. They give not to uplift, but to position themselves above you. Stoicism recognizes this as moral corruption disguised as goodness. The correct response is not confrontation or accusation, but inner clarity and measured distance. When guilt no longer works, their false kindness loses their power, and your freedom of reason is restored. Sign 4. They feed on your emotional reactions. One of the most telling signs you are dealing with an evil person is that they seem to gain energy, satisfaction, or control from your emotional reactions. In Stoicism, the highest human faculty is reason, and the greatest danger is allowing another person to disturb your inner tranquility. An evil person understands this instinctively. They provoke, irritate, frustrate, or unsettle you, not because of necessity or misunderstanding, but because your reaction feeds them. They observe the flicker of anger, frustration, fear, or sadness, and they take silent delight in it. Marcus Aurelius taught that external events do not harm us, only our judgments about them do, and this type of individual exploits precisely that vulnerability. They do not need to attack openly. Their provocations are often subtle: a sarcastic remark, a dismissive glance, a delay in response, or a carefully chosen word. Over time, you may notice a pattern. No matter how small or indirect the action, your emotional state is consistently affected, and they remain unshaken. This deliberate elicitation of emotional turmoil is a hallmark of vice, because it thrives on dependency. By keeping you off balance, they ensure that your focus shifts from clarity and action to inner agitation, and in doing so, they gain influence without ever needing to be forceful. Epictetus warned that if someone can provoke you, they control you, and this is exactly the method such people use to assert dominance while maintaining the appearance of calm civility. What makes this manipulation particularly insidious is that it often hides behind charm or apparent neutrality. They may appear concerned or teasing, careful never to cross a line that is too obvious. Instead, they operate in a psychological gray zone, always observing and adjusting to maximize your disturbance. Seneca describes such individuals as skilled in emotional warfare because they do not attack with fists, but with
Your frustration, self-doubt, or agitation becomes the fuel that drives their sense of control, and this dynamic can erode your confidence and clarity if left unchecked. A Stoic recognizes these patterns not through anger, but through observation. If interactions with someone consistently leave you unsettled, overthinking, or second-guessing yourself, this is a signal to examine the source of disturbance. The key insight is that the harm comes not from the person's actions themselves, but from your reaction to them. Once you see that your emotional responses are being manipulated, you regain the power to respond differently. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself that maintaining inner calm is not passive, but a choice, a practice of reason over instinct. By refusing to give your emotional energy as sustenance, the Stoic denies the manipulator their reward. The practical Stoic response is not confrontation, but measured detachment.
Responding calmly, factually, and without visible agitation removes the pleasure they derive from your reactions. Silence, brevity, and controlled composure act as shields. Over time, the manipulator's attempts lose potency because they rely on feedback, and when none is given, their influence diminishes. In Stoic thought, freedom lies in maintaining inner sovereignty, regardless of external pressures, and this is the most effective defense against anyone who seeks to feed on your emotional state. Ultimately, the person who feeds on your emotional reactions thrives on your inner disorder. They appear harmless to outsiders, yet their power over you is profound because it attacks your capacity for reason. Stoicism teaches that virtue cannot be surrendered to appease another's desire for control. By observing without attachment, responding without reactivity, and guarding the mind's tranquility, the Stoic dissolves the manipulator's influence and restores the freedom of thought and ease. Emotional stability. That is the essence of human dignity.
Sign 5. They slowly isolate you from your strength. The final and perhaps most insidious sign of dealing with an evil person is their methodical effort to isolate you from your own power, resources, and support. In Stoic philosophy, true strength resides in reason, virtue, and the inner harmony of the soul. An evil person understands that if they can disconnect you from these foundations, your confidence, your relationships, your autonomy, they can quietly dominate without overt force. This isolation is rarely dramatic. It is subtle, incremental, and calculated. They erode your influence by undermining your confidence, sowing doubt about your judgment, or creating dependencies that chip away at your independence. Over time, you may notice that decisions you once made freely now feel constrained, that your voice is muted, and that you rely more on them to navigate challenges that once felt manageable. They achieve this not through open aggression, but through psychological manipulation
and social control. They may discourage your relationships with others, criticize or belittle those you trust, or subtly create situations where your abilities seem inadequate. They may present themselves as your sole supporter, mentor, or ally, while simultaneously diminishing alternative sources of strength. Marcus Aurelius repeatedly emphasized that humans are social beings, yet he also warned that external dependence can make the mind vulnerable. By isolating you, the evil person creates a controlled environment in which your reason is compromised and your judgment is influenced by their presence and narrative. Isolation also comes through emotional means. By exploiting guilt, shame, or loyalty, they make you question whether your friends, family, or colleagues truly understand or support you. Every attempt to reach outward for validation or guidance is subtly obstructed, leaving you increasingly reliant on the very person who seeks to weaken you. Epictetus taught that nothing the mind can truly harm it, yet the mind can be weakened by repeated deception and manipulation. By eroding your confidence in yourself and in your allies, they create a dependency that is both mental and emotional, making it far easier to control your actions and perceptions. This process is dangerous because it often goes unnoticed until significant damage has been done. The isolation is gradual. Each small step seems reasonable or innocuous on its own. You may feel unsure, hesitant, or distracted, but never realize that these effects are cumulative strategies designed to weaken your autonomy. Seneca advised constant vigilance over one's social and intellectual environment, recognizing that subtle encroachments on freedom are often the work of those who exploit virtue rather than cultivate it. The evil person prefers you weak, divided, and uncertain, while they remain strong, confident, and morally unscrupulous. The Stoic defense against such manipulation is rooted in awareness
and detachment. Recognize the incremental erosion of independence as a deliberate tactic, not a coincidence or your own failure. Reaffirm connections that strengthen reason, cultivate relationships that encourage growth, and maintain practices that reinforce autonomy and clarity of thought. By returning focus to what is within your control, your decisions, your judgments, your virtue, you resist the slow encroachment of influence. Marcus Aurelius repeatedly reflected on the importance of self-reliance and the sanctity of reason, reminding himself that no one can take your inner freedom unless you permit it. Ultimately, an evil person seeks to isolate you because a person who is isolated is easier to control, manipulate, and dominate. Their attacks are subtle, their strategies patient, and their goal long-term. Stoicism teaches that true freedom and strength are cultivated within, impervious to external erosion if guarded vigilantly. By maintaining inner clarity, nurturing supportive connections, and refusing to surrender autonomy, the Stoic not only recognizes this form of manipulation, but actively dismantles its power, ensuring that one's reason, virtue, and strength remain intact regardless of external threats.